Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we are doing the best day of the month, the last one of the year. You guys have brought it, and we're going to be talking about what exactly your prompt was and seeing some, I don't know if we should say exciting, probably, hopefully, I'm hoping hilarious. Okay, that's where my hopes are. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through LMIAY, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your creative genius. You know, except for this. I mean, it is what we are doing today, except for this month, which this month, since it is December, we are having our third annual cringe stream at the end of the year. It'll be on New Year's, probably. We'll see when we get there. It'll be either on the last Friday or Tuesday. We'll see. I'm still, because I want to finish the 7.5. I want to try to finish the 7.5 deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, but then Tuesday is Yakuza Day, but Tuesday is also New Year's Eve. We'll figure it out the closer we get. Okay, probably we'll figure it out. But we're going to be doing the cringe stream at the end of the year, which is just, the prompt is you interpret what you believe is cringe and write a cringe story. And then we read it anonymous, so you can just do your due. And then during the Loinies, which is also the annual award ceremony for the Loin stream and also for the creative community here, we are then going to vote on the best cringe. So it's your chance to just have an exciting time, show off the levels of cringe that you can go, and let it be anonymous beyond, I need to know for purposes of the award ceremony. But otherwise, it'll be good. And the information on that will be in the community tab, theoretically, hopefully, by the time this goes up. And you can find the submission form for the cringe stream, usually where you would find the LMIAY. It's just going to be cringe stream this time. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit your cover and the first chapter to the Fresh Meat feature, it'll be that first chapter will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. Maybe it is me, maybe it is not me. We will find out. But there are plenty of readers in the ocean, so you better just do your due of getting it out there. Make it look nice. Make sure that the formatting is minimum, please, for your sanity and for the sanity of readers specifically. And then the third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. My newest novel, Body More Zero, featuring these fine gentlemen over here, was released at the end of October, and now it is readily available to be read. Eventually, someday, I'm behind on the audiobook, but eventually, someday, all of the Body Mores will have audiobooks. We're struggling right now to keep up with everything. With that said, let's get into the prompt. Now, do you know what the prompt is? Do you know what it is now? Do you know what it is now? Look, I'm not a violent person, but I can't help being slap happy right now. That's right. I gave you the prompt that a supernatural feeling or a lack of control took over, and one character could not stop themselves from slapping another or many others. It was up to you how the slap was used, but we are in a slap fest. With that said, let's get into the stories, you guys. The last time this year, well, aside from cringe stream, but the first writer today is Mae Tanner. Bethil dragged Ralia to his cabin. My client didn't tell me that you had a maiden when I deliver you. You won't get away with this. My betrothed will find you and rescue me. Bethil laughed. He won't be able to find us. Your escort will think that bandits from the slum kidnapped you. He shoved her through the door into the cabin and onto the bunk. Behind him, the cabin door slammed against the wall. You keeping the seeds for her, ain't ya? He turned. Tiansa had followed him into the cabin. I told you, I ain't got any seeds. He grabbed his supply box and showed her its contents. See? There's nothing but the blossoms. Those taste bad and don't work. She knocked the box out of his hands, scattering the blossoms. Bethil's burnt hand erupted in agony as the box jarred it. He clenched his wrist with his good hand. You ain't twitching. They have to work a little. Maybe you just ain't eaten enough of 'em. You got seeds. I seen you pack 'em in your bag. You gonna give 'em to her? Tienza pointed to Ralia. Ralia nodded. He has the seeds hidden in his pockets. Tienza shrieked and pounced on Bathil, tearing his clothes. I knew it! He hugged his burnt hand to his chest while he batted at her with his good hand. My mistake. He hid his seeds under the bandage around his hand. Icy talons of terror gripped Bathil's heart as Tienza grabbed his burnt hand and ripped off the bandage. He screamed as it fluttered to the floor and she clawed at the burn itself. What's going on here? Get her off! Hands pulled Tienza away. A pair of Bathil's guards had come to his cabin. He stumbled to his feet. Blood dripped from his injured hand. Lock them both in an empty cabin. We'll see how the bitches like being confined together. He sneered at Tienza. Once we get back, we'll hold a bloody orgy, and I'll give you all the Zerlich seeds that you can eat. Liar! You're gonna give the seeds to her! Oh, I'll give you the seeds, all right. Then we'll drain your blood and feast. He turned to Ralia. Maybe I'll let you watch before I deliver you to my client. The guards hustled the two women out of Bathil's cabin, and he pulled out the bandages and salve for his hands. High intensity moment. We are starting off with some action. We are starting off with some conflict. We are starting off with theft and seeds. It seems. Off to a good start, my guys. Check out Mae Tanner's website for more of this story, I'm assuming, with her link down below. The next story is by Dukeman called The Holy Slap. Three priests hurried down a narrow stone corridor deep beneath an ancient temple. They stopped at a thick metal door with a thin slat, barely enough to peer into the cell. The high priest peeked into the room. Inside was a disheveled man in rags, hunched over, bound in a metal chair bolted to the floor. How long has this poor wretch been here? The high priest asked. No more than 3 hours, High Priest Cornelius. We called for thee as soon as we got the report. It took 10 sturdy men to drag him here. He maimed several of them, William said. This is unfortunate. Thank you, Father William. Cornelius turned to the youngest. What's your name, son? My name is Harold, sir, he said with a slight bow. Have you ever confronted a demon before? No, sir. This is my first, he said, still bowing. Observe and remember, Cornelius whispered, then pushed open the door. The three priests stood in front of the man for a moment. He did not move. Priest William launched into a hushed prayer, and Harold unpacked the tools of exorcism that he was carrying. The high priest knelt before the man. What is your name? The man did nothing. To whom am I speaking to? The man snapped up, back arching, nostrils flared, and yelled, I am Proger, the triple-horned butcher of the innocent, wrecker of the holy place, and I will tear your little chapel asunder. He struggled against the chains and thrashed in the chair. Cornelius recoiled. Harold, strike up the incense and hand me our holy ward. William, begin the hymn of exaltation. This is going to get ugly. The possessed man, smile stretched from ear to ear. You will be very ugly when I escape and tear you to shreds. Then he launched a barrage of insults and curses in a demonic tongue. His skin glowed red. Harold, the incense in the ward, now! A metallic clatter echoed throughout the chamber. Both William and the demon fell silent. All looked and saw Harold shaking over the chest, which held the holy objects. Then he stood. Blue flames came pouring from his eyes and mouth. I do not permit thee to speak here, foul demon. The demon laughed. What trickery is this? Are you priests so pathetic that you... Harold raised an empty palm and slapped the possessed man's face with such force that it broke the chains that bound him to the chair. The high priest said to Harold, You fool! It's going to kill! Silence! Harold said. The demon rose and laughed. Now you will face my... But the swift slap of Harold's hand launched him through the stone wall and into the next cell. The possessed man tried to crawl away, but there was no escape. Harold raised his hand, and it burst into blue flame. When his holy slap connected with the possessed man's face, the ethereal form of the horned demon shot out of the man's body. It looked around the room and then itself, mouthing words that no one could hear before dissipating. Harold and the man collapsed. The two priests rushed over and helped him up. The man rubbed his jaw. Where am I? Why does my face hurt so much? What happened? Harold asked. Cornelius pat Harold on the back. Congratulations on completing your first exorcism, son. Oh my gosh. I love it. I love just the flying through the walls. I mean, I should say sending the guy through the walls. Just the focus of the slap, the holy slap. I don't know. I think that was just fun. I love the way that it was done, the tension, also the play in it. Just, Dukeman, that was fun. The next story is by Egao Chan, called Troubled Girl. The time was late, and the moon was out. The lights were dimmed. Tanya and Sherman were on the sofa watching a movie on TV, a candlelit dinner and a movie, something that they had not done for at least a year. I'm worried about her. I'm not sure what to do. Curling up in her husband's arms, Tanya shook her head and sighed. I'm not really comfortable letting her read those books. She's still too young to read romance novels. That's why she needs our guidance, especially yours. Sherman kicked his wife's hair as he caressed her shoulder. It's helped her, and she did stop having those terrible night terrors. We handled it. We'll deal with the sleepwalking too. I guess, Tanya sighed again. And are you sure that she's too young for those? Sherman chuckled. Because when we met, you were reading much raunchier. Hey, they're not raunchy. Tanya slapped her husband's chest flirtatiously. They were just spicy. Tomato. Sherman snickered and held his wife closer. Before their lips could touch, a shadow flashed across their doors. Before they could touch, a shadow flashed across the door-side window. It was a tall man in black. This instantly caught the couple's eyes. Sherman shot up from the sofa and approached the window. What's that? Did you see anything? Tanya asked. Go upstairs and hide with Riley, Sherman whispered as he peeked out the window below. Bang! Their front door lock was bashed from the outside and popped out of its position. The wooden door itself was kicked open. Two men in black coats and with their faces covered by black masks charged inside. Sherman tried to stop the men, but was met with the butt of a shotgun on his nose. Tanya tried to run upstairs, but was dragged down the stairs by a man holding a handgun. Please don't hurt them! Sherman could only beg while the shotgun was pointed right at his face. Take the money. Take whatever you want. Just don't hurt my family. Shut up! The man holding the shotgun barked as his accomplice dragged Tanya to Sherman's side and forced her to sit down. Where's the cash? Jewelry! It's in the study back there. Sherman moved to sit between Tanya and the barrels of the gun. Please, just take everything and go. We don't want any trouble. Go check. The man holding the shotgun nodded at the man with the handgun, who nodded back at him. Just when he was about to go, footsteps came from upstairs. That's our daughter. Please! Sherman almost jumped, but was forced back down by the shotgun. She's just sleepwalking. Please don't hurt her. The man with the handgun looked up the staircase, just in time to see a young girl in her pajamas walking down step by step with a book tucked under her right arm. Nobody moved for a minute or two. The young girl walked past the four adults in the first-floor living room, ignoring everyone. She sat down on the sofa and began reading. Twin Stars of Different Names, the book was called, and the cover art was a drawing of two beautiful boys looking longingly at each other. Please, she's harmless, Tanya begged, tears running down her face. She's just sleepwalking. She's been doing this since she was 4. Go. The man holding the shotgun signaled to his cohorts to check the study in the back. Their eyes met. In a moment as short as a blink of an eye, but also as long as a lifetime of bright stars, their hearts synced. They knew what was on each other's minds. The girl read from the book aloud. Their hearts were racing, their breaths heavier and hotter. The air grew thick, and they forgot everything other than themselves and the feelings storming inside them. The two masked men in black stopped what they were doing at the same time. They were already caught in the moment of eye contact, but it seemed that they were either unwilling or unable to break it. More brazenly, while these two men were breathing heavily and loudly, their weapons were on the verge of falling off their grip. Neither Sherman nor Tanya could see clearly what these men's eyes looked like, but with even just a few glimpses, they could sense the bizarre and even creepy tension between them. The young girl flipped a big bulk of pages and got on to somewhere close to the end of the book. This was unthinkable, unimaginable, unbearable, and horrendous. How could he do that? How could this happen? White-hot rage burned in his stomach. He lost his control. One hand flew up, then down, a clear red palm marked with left on the face of the person that he'd never thought that he would hurt. Thud, thud. The guns dropped to the ground. The man who had a handgun raised his right hand and swung it at his partner in crime's face. Spit with traces of blood shot out of the other man's mouth. He could barely stand on his feet, almost bumped into the wall behind him. Sherman grabbed the shotgun and jumped straight up, pointing the weapon at the two intruders. Hands up, you bastards! The police arrived in just 5 minutes. It was a miracle that none of them were seriously hurt in such an armed home invasion. After a few basic questions, the officers agreed that Sherman and Tanya could come in the morning to give their statements, while Riley tucked back in her bed and fell asleep almost immediately. For Sherman and Tanya, on the other hand, it would be a sleepless night. I love this idea, this character idea, that is just reading and kind of controlling or being able to control other people, like also writing real life fan fiction, basically. I love this idea with this character and this being like a superpower, not a superpower, but like, I mean, I guess in a way, because there's a few other ways to describe it, but you know what I mean. I love this idea of this character a lot, and the way that scene played out, great introduction to that character. I mean, it's a standalone piece, obviously, but it could be more. It could be an introduction to this character idea if she's part of a larger thing or from somewhere else. The next story is by N.K. McKeever. For someone who seems to know so much about humans, you don't seem to know how to care for a human consort, Count Orsino mused, glancing around the room performatively. Why, I don't think I've seen your darling Persephone since we started talking. Immediately panicked, Soren began to look around the room for Persephone, only to find her absent. You couldn't have, he began. You swore an oath. The Count chuckled. My dear boy, I assure you, I have not laid a hand on her. As if on cue, Persephone walked through from the door leading to the halls, in some sort of daze, her dark blonde curls falling from the updo that it had been in when they arrived. Even from where he stood, Soren could see the tears in Sheely's green fabric of her dress, and welts on her wrists and arms, even what looked like handprints on her face. After a moment of taking in the scene, he noticed her ashwood ring and the string of rowan berries displayed around her neck were missing. Her eyes had a glazed overlook, as if she was under a glamour. It all clicked into place. Count Orsino hadn't hurt her himself, therefore technically keeping his oath, but he did arrange for others to rip off her charm, leaving her unprotected from any spell. He could deal with the Count later. Persephone was what was important right now. He hurried across the room as she stumbled into the crowd. He finally reached her, pulling her close and brushing her hair out of her face. It's all right, Sephi, I'm here, he soothed. Why don't you get out of here so that we can take care of you, okay? Glamours were simple magic, hardly a spell, really. It couldn't be that hard to break. Before he could finish the thought, a blur came to him, and suddenly his cheek erupted with a sharp sting. It wasn't until Persephone was coming down from the second blow that he realized what had happened. It was petty, considering all the things whoever Orsino hired could have compelled her to do. Then again, petty was just Orsino's style. His cheek burst, stinging again. Persephone raised her hand again, but Soren was quick enough to grab her wrist. Sephi, this isn't you, he urged, taking a step back, nearly hitting another counter. I know this isn't you. Come on, Sephi. If anyone can fight this, it's you. Others were starting to notice the commotion. Some looked concerned, others, even a few Seelie, were enjoying the chaos with fiendish glee. Seelie or unseelie, the folk loved their drama. Bracken broke through the crowd, Antheorum and Greer following right behind as Persephone raised her left hand. Soren tried to move out of the way, and Bracken grabbed a hold of her other wrist. "What happened?" the fairy prince exclaimed. "She's been glamoured," Soren responded, still struggling as Persephone fought against them. He could see tears welling up in her eyes. She was at least somewhat aware of what was happening. This was his fault. He should have never let her out of his sight. He should have never let her get involved in all of this. "Well, I can see that," Bracken hissed, dodging as Persephone nearly hit him in an attempt to get to Soren. "This can't be." Greer cut the argument off. "We need to get salt." She looked around. "Anth, the Night Queen came, didn't she?" As if on cue, the Night Queen and consort, a lanky man with reddish-brown hair, came running through the crowd, the consort holding a small silver jar in his hand. He opened it, revealing bright white salt, which he put his fingers in, retrieving a generous pinch of the substance. "You'll probably need to hold her mouth open. Glamour victims are often told to avoid this stuff." "Sorry about this," Anthurium said, prying Persephone's mouth open as the consort put his fingers in, smearing her mouth with the stuff. The Night Queen covered Persephone's mouth, forcing her to swallow. The glaze on her eyes faded, and she just looked confused and afraid as the Fae backed away, except for Soren, who held his arms out in case she needed them. "What?" Persephone stammered before stumbling back into Soren's arms, breaking into sobs. "It's all right," Soren soothed, pulling her into his arms as Greer draped her sealskin cloak over the human girl. "I got you. It's over now." He glanced at the royals surrounding him. "I'm sorry. I should get her home." "Home or home?" the Night Queen's consort asked pointedly. "That depends on her," Soren said, rubbing small circles on Persephone's back. However, a rather loud voice in the back of his mind was screaming that if he really loved her, he would drop her off at her sister's, whether she called upon his oath or not. This had gone too far as it was. "If you don't mind, I'll have a guard escort you to the carriage," Anthurium offered before turning to his sulky bride. "Now, if you excuse me, I need to find Orsino." This time we had a discussion on how guests of the crowd are to be treated, regardless of their species. Again, another great segment. Obviously, another piece to a bigger story that has a lot more going on because we're in the middle of what was probably something of a kidnapping of Persephone and returning her. And I like the vibe of this. I know Fae are super popular right now. Persephone and Hades stories are also extremely popular. I like the vibe in this scene, the relationships come through in this scene, and the way of the magic with the salt. I don't know how common that is since I don't really go out of my way to read Fae stuff, so you'll have to let me know if you've heard of the thing with the salt, but I really like the thing with the salt. So thank you so much for submitting. The next story is by MaraMagnus / Mara Weaver. A slap echoed in the apartment hallway. Aurora looked at her own hand in horror and immediately started blubbering. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me." The door slammed in her face. Aurora had slapped her boyfriend and didn't even know why. What was wrong with her? She looked at her hand and it seemed to wink at her. How could her hand wink at her? She needed privacy. She needed to get away from the space. She ran, crying, to the elevator. Aurora slapped the elevator call button multiple times and sank down while the elevator came to the 14th floor. She leaned against the wall and sobbed. "You're better off without that deadbeat. Trust me," a voice said. "What? Who?" Aurora asked. She looked around and didn't see anyone. "I'm your conscience," the voice snickered. "Just kidding. I'm your grandmother." "Oh, which one? Granny Mitchell?" The elevator chimed and the doors opened, but the shock prevented Aurora from getting in. She wiped her tears and her snotty nose. "How?" Aurora asked. "Girl, I died. How do you think?" Granny Mitchell responded. Aurora couldn't see her, but there was a presence that she could feel beside her, like a slight chill emanating from her right side. A chill crossed her shoulder like a cold arm, and she shivered. "Why are you here?" "You're my granddaughter, and you needed someone to look out for you. That boy was no good for you." Aurora sat and thought. Granny Mitchell had been kind but distant. Her family had never spent much time at Granny Mitchell's, even though she had lived fairly close. She always liked Granny Mitchell, but her parents seemed to hate Granny and had only come by for the large Christmas dinners that she hosted or on the very occasional visits to ask for money. Granny had always given it with a kind word, so Aurora had never understood why. Granny had always given it with a kind word, so Aurora had never understood why. She'd died a few years ago in her sleep, not long after Aurora started transitioning. How long have you been here?" "Oh, since I died." "Oh no. Oh gosh, what have you seen?" Aurora said, panicking. She'd been in a few relationships since then. "Oh, your granny's seen it all a long time ago, but I respect your privacy. I didn't see any of your bedroom activities," Granny said, her sense of humor shining through. "Oh, thank goodness," Aurora said. Aurora hit the call button and the elevator chimed immediately. She got in and felt Granny follow her. She thought that her always feeling a bit cold was the hormones, but maybe Granny had contributed. "So, what makes you say that he was bad for me?" Aurora asked. "Girl, you're a lesbian. I could see it on your face every time you went in for a kiss." "You said that you weren't watching," Aurora interrupted, "and you looked like you were eating sour candy," Granny said flatly. Aurora exclaimed, "I like sour candy." "I know, dear, but that's not the point. You've been transitioning for a few years and you seem so happy with yourself. Why are you with men when you don't seem to like 'em? Every single boy that you've kissed, you seem so sad." "But I'm a girl. Aren't I supposed to like men?" "Not all girls like men, dear. I didn't." "What about Grandpa Mitchell?" Aurora asked. "I forced myself into that marriage and stayed with it because of your father and your aunt, but I wasn't happy until I admitted to myself the truth. Me and Grandpa Mitchell had an understanding, and once I started loving myself and admitting that I loved women, our lives became so much better. I started seeing women on the side, and once your grandpa passed, full time. Your father, religious as he became, hated that," Granny said, sighing. So, so that's why we never came over except for Christmas?" "Yeah, he loved Grandpa, but hated who I was. He hated my partner in the last couple of years of my life, and every year during Christmas he asked me to repent, as if I would give up the happiest years of my life to give in to his bigotry." The elevator chimed, and Aurora headed to the front entrance. "Okay, Granny, I'll give women a go, but please, don't make me slap anyone else. I promise. Unless they're horrible for you and make you unhappy. Deal." Aurora walked out into the winter air, unbuttoning her jacket against the cold and ready to embrace herself fully. Always got that granny looking out for you. It's always nice to have the support and love of your family, even when you're at a distance, because if they were also coming over, even during the holidays, and then asking for money and the money was still offered, obviously there was still some attempt at a relationship that just was not happening. But Granny obviously stuck with her grandchild in the end anyway, and very much cared about her grandchild. Makes you wonder if Granny is out there looking over all of her grandchildren, or if Aurora is her only granddaughter. The next story is by Outlier. A soft blue glow nestled itself within the four walls of the artificer's A soft blue glow nestled itself within the four walls of the artificer's laboratory, courtesy of the magic crystals sporadically strewn about, each one having its own ornate perch. In the center of the room stood a single dilapidated leather chair. The artificer stood next to it, hunched over one of its arms, and beneath him, sitting atop the chair's armrest, was an amalgamation of steel plates and wiring that approximated a human arm. And currently attached to said arm was a young man with sandy brown hair. The young man leaned away from the artificer as much as he could, frantically switching his wide-eyed gaze from the man's bald head to the young woman standing across from him. The woman, whose features mirrored his own, prioritized the expulsion of dirt from underneath her fingernails rather than the engineer's tinkering. And thus the young man's concerned glances went unnoticed. After pursing his lips, the young man straightened out his fingers of his left. After pursing his lips, the young man straightened his fingers of his hand and began to rhythmically tap them on the other's armrest. Tap, 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 tap. After pursing his lips, the young man straightened out the fingers of his left hand and began to rhythmically tap them on the other armrest. Tap, 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 tap. The young woman's gaze immediately flew upward, finally finding the patient's, though the only thing that she had to offer was a single upturned brow. The young man made a show of glancing at and leaning his head forward, the gray-bearded workman on his right. In response, the young woman shrugged her shoulders. The young man rolled his eyes. "So, Doc, how many arms have you replaced?" the young man began. What's that?" The technician quickly raised his head, nearly clipping the young man's chin in the process, and once his eyes were leveled with the boy's, he peeled back the set of magnifying glasses that were currently in front of his spectacles. "Did you say something?" Oh no, my sister was just wondering how many times you've, done this before, replacing missing limbs. I mean, I'm sure that you've done it 1,000 times, and you know women, they love to worry." The young man glanced at his sister at his left. The young man glanced at his sister as he left his last few words to hang in the air, a fragile smile dancing on the corners of his lips. The young woman made a show of rolling her eyes and shaking her head. A soft audible chuckle followed soon after. "Ah, that's sweet. But not to worry. Oh, that's sweet. But not to worry, little lady. I'll have your brother's arm fixed in no time flat. Gotta say, though, I'm surprised that they let a youngin' like yourself down into the mines in the first place. Normally, only dust-crusted men or old fogies like me are allowed to waste away down here in the depths. No wonder you lost a limb." We're not miners, Pops," the young woman cooed. "We're adventurers." "Adventurers?" the artisan asked. In response, the young woman gestured to her leather armor, which sat atop the plain woolen clothes. "Ah, it's just as well. Whether adventurer or miner, I'm sure your coin is just as good for purchasing whiskey." With that, the old man swung his magnifying glasses back over his spectacles and resumed the prayerful posture over the young man's prosthetic, his hand delicately twisting and turning and prodding gears into place with the help of a thin sterling silver wrench. The young man looked back at his sister, his eyes wide and teeth visibly clenched. His sister smiled devilishly at him and then proceeded to trace a cross out in front of her, ending the motion with her hands clasped. The young man narrowed his eyes. "And there, all done," the technician exclaimed. As the old man straightened out his back again, the open metal flaps of his metal arm began to move and twist, clinking and clacking over and over until they all sat in uniform rows and flush against the arm's motors. "Aha! I've done it again. Now why don't you give your new arm a spin, boyo?" "Right. Just for curiosity's sake, how is this thing supposed to work?" the young man asked, continuing to lean away with his arm as if he were a viper poised to strike. "Well, this beauty works like any other arm. It takes a zappies generated by a person's brain and uses them to move around while also making its own zappies. Though, in this case, your arm uses mana to do the zapping instead of your brain. So I guess, technically, you zip instead of zap." The old man stroked his beard thoughtfully at his own suggestions, while the young man looked down at his arm with two upturned brows and a hand reaching up towards his left ear. But before his fingers could find the purple and black tip of his left ear, his sister's hands clasped around his. The young man shifted his gaze toward his sister. She gave him a stern look and a soft shaking of her head. "You'll be fine," she pleaded. The young man lowered his hand and smiled up at his sister. In response, she took a step back and held out her hand toward her brother. "Come on, let's see how this thing works." The young man arose from his chair, using his left arm to brace himself, and once he stood eye to eye with his sister, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. All at once, a soft blue glow, like that of the rooms, began to spill out of the seams of the young man's robotic hand. The glow steadily crept from the wrist to the elbow to the shoulder to the young man's still fleshed chest. The robotic arm slowly raised itself to meet the young man's sister, but before flesh and steel palms could align, the robotic arm jerked its hand up and then across the young woman's face. The old man jumped back. The young man gasped in horror, and the young woman looked at her brother with the fury of the soon-to-be only child. This sounds like a great origin story. I mean, not necessarily an origin story, because it could happen anywhere in a larger body of, like, after he loses his arm, probably in the first act of a book. It doesn't even have to be the first book. It could be the second book. But it sounds like a great opening to, like, build these characters or to introduce these characters for what would be probably a fantasy story, because we've got mana involved. And it would be, I don't know if it would be about the two of them or if there would be a larger party, but I like the vibe of these characters. I like the vibe of this setting. Great job. And I like that it is a mana powered arm. The last story for this month is by KawaiiGroovycat. I know that based on my title and job description, at least going off of how it was explained to me, that I'm supposed to be seducing humans into sin. But some things are a little bit much even for me. From the few interviews that I'd conducted early into my reign, I realized that humans could be categorized into one of three boxes: deranged, delusional, or downright dumb. Very rarely did anyone ever fit into more than one. And admittedly, the latest addition to the overstacked stack of files on my desk labeled extremely fraudulent business practices didn't do much to clue me in on which box this newbie would be placed into. I pressed the intercom button on the desk. Send them in. Immediately, the door to my office creaked open and a sharply dressed woman strutted in, wearing a tailored suit shimmered faintly like it was woven from coins and a polished golden pin in the shape of a dollar sign that adorned her collar. Holy shit. I bet she even shits in a toilet made completely of gold. Mr. Satan, she began, extending a hand with perfectly manicured nails, or do you prefer your infernal majesty? I'm flexible. I ignored the hand and gestured toward the chair across from me. Sit. Let's get this over with. The woman settled into the seat with the air of someone closing a lucrative deal. I reluctantly opened her file. Caprice Talisman, I read. God save me. This is just... You're like a regular Girl Scout, you know that? Committing financial crime after financial crime like you're trying to earn badges, pyramid schemes, predatory loans, exploiting labor, insider trading, environmental destruction. Oh, and it says that you also single-handedly crashed Zimbabwe's economy? Caprice simply smiled, unbothered. It was only mostly their economy, and really, it was just helping them embrace free market principles. I felt my eye twitch. You displaced over 1 million people, bankrupted families, and set off a decade-long recession. Details, she said breezily. I see it as creative problem solving. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few. I swear to me, if you say eggs, I'll break something else, I growled, pinching the bridge of my nose. Touchy, Caprice said, smiling. You know, I've always admired your work, manipulating desires, bending wills, making people want things that they don't need. Gosh, you're practically the original entrepreneur. I slammed the file shut. Let's make one thing clear. I didn't create capitalism, nor do I endorse it. That's humanity's mess. And unlike you, I don't profit from suffering. I merely punish it. Caprice leaned forward, unfazed. You're looking at this all wrong. I wasn't hurting people. I was empowering them, giving them opportunities to better themselves. Opportunities, I barked. You sold self-help courses to starving families for their last pennies. And they chose to buy them, she countered, folding her arms. Choice is the cornerstone of freedom. That's when I feel it, the mostly familiar tug of my infernal magic itching under my skin. I leaned quickly. I learned quickly that it tends to linger in moments of anger, but this time it surged, unbidden, tightening my muscles. I stiffly leaned back in my chair, trying to figure out which of the three boxes she fit into. Delusional seemed obvious, but there was an undeniable dash of downright dumb sprinkled in for flavor, and the confidence? That was pure deranged. She was a rare trifecta, the infernal holy grail. Caprice giggled. I know that it's a lot to take in, but let's not dwell on the past, shall we? I'm here to discuss opportunities. I believe hell could benefit greatly from someone with my skill set. I sigh. Caprice, let me be clear. You're not here because I want to hire you. You're here because you're a walking, talking capitalist fever dream who has caused more suffering than a volcanic eruption in a puppy sanctuary. She gave a light laugh. And yet, Here I am. Doesn't that say something about my effectiveness? My patience was fraying faster than hell's budget under my predecessor. What it says is that you've confused raw greed with competence, and I'm starting to think that you're either too delusional to realize it or too deranged to care. Deranged, delusional. It's all a matter of perspective, she said, waving a dismissive hand. What matters is results. And let's be honest, Satan. What matters is results. And let's be honest, Satan. Hell is a business. I can help you run it better than anyone else. The sheer audacity of this woman was staggering. I could feel my magic sparking at the edges of my control, an unfortunate side effect of taking this role before I fully understood how to wield it. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I don't need your help, I said, my voice low and sharp. What I need is for you to... Oh, don't be so hasty to dismiss me, she interrupted, her smug grin turned up a notch. I've always believed that everyone has a price. Even you, Mr. Satan. I was never in the habit of calling women bitches when I was alive, but Jesus be damned. I'd had it up to here with this bitch. My hand moved before my brain caught up. 1 second I was gripping the edge of my desk, and the next my palm made contact with her cheek in a resounding smack. The room went silent. Caprice blinked, stunned, one perfectly coiffed curl trembling from the impact. She slowly touched her cheek, then turned to me, her composure fractured for the first time. Did you just slap me? I froze, hand still hovering mid-air like I'd tried to wave at her face and missed. No? Caprice stared at me, her expression a mix of shock and indignation. You absolutely did! I dropped my hand and leaned back, trying to muster whatever shred of authority I had left. That wasn't me. That was my magic. It's still adjusting to me. I've gotten a lot better at controlling it, but sometimes it still gets a little out of hand and makes me, go off. She narrowed her eyes, unimpressed. Your magic makes you slap people. It has a mind of its own, I said quickly, gesturing vaguely. I wasn't born with this power, and my predecessor didn't exactly leave me with a manual. Caprice's lips tightened into a thin line. I've negotiated with some of the most cutthroat CEOs on Earth, but this is a first. Yeah, well, welcome to hell, I shot back. No refunds, no exchanges. She adjusted her suit, regaining some of her composure. Fine. But let's get one thing straight. If you think a slap is going to intimidate me, you're sorely mistaken. I've been through worse boardroom meetings than this. I've been through worse board meetings than this. I rubbed my temples, trying to ignore the insistent itch of my infernal magic bubbling beneath the surface. Look, Caprice, I don't have time for this. Bad enough that my magic is like an old dog that won't stop peeing on the carpet. If you don't watch what you say, this might happen again. And you'd deserve it just as much as you deserve that. You're not here to pitch yourself as Hell's CFO or whatever delusion you're running with. You're here because you spent your entire life gleefully screwing people over in ways that make demons blush. Caprice's smugness returned. Which you benefit from, no less. If anything, you should be thanking me. Oh, you're definitely getting thanked, I muttered darkly, flipping open her file again. I skimmed through the pages, the sheer volume of her crimes practically radiating off the paper. And I know just the way to do it. Caprice Talisman, for your unprecedented greed, exploitation, flagrant disregard for human decency, and just for being so goddamn annoying, your punishment is... I paused, an idea clicking into place. To run a call center. Her confident smirk faltered. I beg your pardon? You heard me, I said, savoring her horror. An eternity managing a call center in hell. You'll field every complaint, every irate customer, and every idiotic query about why someone's damnation paperwork was misfiled. No power, no assistance. Just you, a headset, and the endless wrath of the damned. Caprice's face contorted into something between outrage and disbelief. You can't be serious. So I am very serious, I said, grinning now. Think of it as a fitting use of your skills. After all, you're so great at dealing with people, right? What is it that you humans say on Earth? Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss? Yeah, you're a perfect candidate for this job. She opened her mouth to protest, but I raised a hand to cut her off. And before you ask, no, there won't be any commission or breaks. Caprice's jaw worked, but no words came out, and she looked genuinely rattled. I leaned back, folding my hands behind my head. Welcome to Hell's customer service department, Caprice. I think that you'll find it to be a perfect fit. Oh my gosh. I think this is the third story that you've submitted this year, at least 3 or 4, that are in hell dealing with people that come into Satan's office. And I love this idea of just this collection that is whoever is in the role of Satan, just dealing with people in this way. And it's just like the diary of Hell's CEO. I don't know. I've thought it's been like a brilliant series, and it's been really funny to see the different scenarios that you come up with and the different situations that are brought into hell and just how exasperated. We got the old Satan and the new Satan, that took over after the other one. For anybody that didn't get to hear any of Groovycat's previous stories, there was a previous one this year where Satan handed the job over to somebody else to take over because Satan was a position and not really his name. And so I'm assuming that this is following after that. So this is the person that took over for Satan. I could be wrong, but that's how I read it. And just, oh my gosh, it has been fun. And I could just imagine a whole collection of stories like this that's just dealing with hell. You guys are all so creative. I love listening to your guys' stories. Thank you so much for everybody submitting. Let me know which were your favorites down in the comments below. With that said, have a great week. Happy December, and don't die.
The only people who should come are those who want to meet their monsters.
If this is what Agatha wants, I don't know how we can even dispute it.
I change lives, baby.
And I end them. Sweetheart, no bargains hold. Only fools know restraint.
Only losers lose!
I've been under the knife so many times, I'm practically immune to it.
If your scissors are dull, may I recommend sharpening them with leather?
I think I hit you.
Mimal says I must have a guardian angel.
To enter the ring but abstain from playing is suicidal. Your virtue makes you nothing but a liability.
You're gonna die. You're gonna die. You're gonna die.